Hello.
You guys, yeah, really good.
Good. It's really nice to meet you. Hello, I'm Sarah. It's really nice to meet you. We haven't met before, so that's great.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Alice.
Hello, Alice. Tell me about what you were doing kind of the other day, and tell me
So
about what you've been doing.
yeah, so actually that was really great, wasn't it, Caroline? Just to go and actually try on the kit and to work out what is going to be appropriate for Mirror and then Kenya and then what you're going to need for Everest. But actually, I think what's really interesting is um I think all of the other adaptations that I've done so far for people have been to do more with actual physical disabilities that I've seen. Whereas, kind of working with blind death, it's like it's all the hidden aspects that you're sort of really bringing to light and really actually creating kind of adaptations for. So I'm finding it super interesting. Um, so we were looking at things like, so Caroline's got her guide, and actually what's going to be like the sort of the best way to see where her guide is placing his or her feet. And so as that can help in the process of aiding Caroline. But also I thought was so interesting when we were talking about kind of like whether we should put any reflectiveness or colors on the gloves, and you were like, oh, actually we communicate by putting the hand like that. I was like, and what's really funny is like what always comes to light for me is every time we're talking about adaptions, it's inevitably things that you're like, well, this would help everybody. you know and even when we're looking at integrating the haptic, and I think about some of the environments that people are go like mountaineers are going to be in where they can't communicate with each other, actually a haptic device makes a lot of sense in
Yeah.
so many situations. So it's really interesting.
So tell me, like, so that's really interesting. But tell me about you. How did you get into doing this? Like, where did this kind of come from for you?
Well, I mean, so I'm trained as a technical sportswear designer. So I've worked on all kinds of things from the Olympics to the All Blacks rugby team to kind of surf brands. And then in 2015, I ended up paralyzed down my left side from a neurological disease. And it was kind of like a really long, kind of 6, 7 year of recovery, lots of complications, lots of hospital treatments, operations, that kind of thing. And then I met Ed and Lois from M2M, and they were like, "You need to come and be a beneficiary." And like everyone, I'm like, "Oh no, I'm fine. Like, there's other people that they'll need it." But actually, like, you don't realize until you're in it actually how much you needed that group of people that were gonna kind of go to those deeper levels of understanding of what you kind of go through. So it's been amazing. And while I've sort of been with them, like my career's sort of been like, oh, I'm in an industry that isn't designed for everybody, and it certainly isn't designed for people like me. And the actual working landscape isn't designed for people like me either, and isn't really truly inclusive in any way, shape, or form. And I was starting to feel really like I was the problem. And at the same time, Millimeters to Mountains were like, well, look, we're trying to work with brands. We want to adapt kit, but there seems to be an issue and we don't know what it is. And to me, it was really quick what the issue was. I was like, well, the design team know what adaptations could happen, but they don't understand the nuances of different types of impairments, disabilities, and conditions. And then the people who have those impairments and conditions don't understand the potential of how adaptations could enhance their experience. And I was like, okay, I'm in the middle of this. So that's where I've kind of found myself now. And I actually left my job at the end of last year, where I was dealing with a lot of disability discrimination there. So I left, and actually I've gone freelance, and I'm working with lots of different brands to make everything more accessible.
What sort of stuff? What sort of things? So we know
Well,
about the Berghaus, you know, sort of that. But I mean, explain to us about
yeah,
what you're doing
there's obviously the Berghaus project, and there's everything that we're doing there, and that's going to be that is growing. So it's going to be that. I mean, that really is growing over the next year. You know, yeah, there's so much going on there. And then the other brand I work with is Vivo Barefoot, in actually making footwear more accessible to, and particularly like when I was out at the Paralympics, one of the big things that footwear companies were being called out on was that they were using sort of amputees with one running shoe on, but then they were refusing to sell just one shoe to amputees, so it kind of didn't make any sense. So I think again it's kind of like, then being able to work with brands that do want to change that narrative and kind of go, actually, yeah, we're doing something really good with our footwear here, because I find their stuff incredibly good for like because mine's all been kind of that neurological and needing to like know where my foot is and get balance. Kind of going barefoot for me was a very natural thing. So that's been a very natural company to work with. And then one of the other companies I'm working with now has moved from clothing right into spaces, into accessible kind of cabins for people to live in, and also kind of for the kind of off-grid outdoors I guess tourism. It isn't that accessible, and it really should be. So yeah, so it's kind of branching into lots of different areas at the moment, and definitely.
But tell me also then about things like how is it different? You were just talking about you've done lots for more visible and physical kind of stuff. So tell me about kind of why it is different looking at deafblind or kind of
I
those.
I think, well, yeah, I mean it's so interesting, isn't it? I think firstly we can't we don't know everyone's lived experiences of different things, right? And the thing is, it's nuanced, and I think this is where we've gone really wrong in society, is we've put it into like black and white thinking. So like I've actually genuinely seen people with their walking cane, using their walking cane, and then needing to look at their phone and being called out by other people being like, oh, are you actually blind? It's like, oh, okay. So what people don't understand is that there's like everything is on a spectrum and variation, and everyone's experience is really different and unique. And I've had this myself personally. So like now that I can walk around and I can do things, but I have a weak left leg, I have clonus in my left leg, I have bladder and bowel issues, I have issues with my heart, all to do with incomplete spinal cord injury, but I can walk around. So people don't realize what you're living with, right?
Mm.
And so I think until it happened to me, I didn't realize how funneled we are and blinkered, and how little we know about other people's experiences. And so I think what's interesting is the first kind of adaptations that I was doing was around spinal cord injury and brain injury. And I was like, okay, well, I understand that because I've experienced some of that, got that. But then obviously like blind death it's that thing of like, because I was saying to Caroline the other day, I watched a really good documentary, and it was all about different types of tennis that are coming to the forefront. So like blind tennis, deaf tennis, standing tennis for people like myself who don't need to be in a wheelchair but can't run. And it was really interesting because they put like because there were different people with different types of visual impairment, and they put on different goggles on the camera so you could see what it was like, so it's kind of like you can't make any assumptions about. So for example, with Caroline, like I kind of really getting to know, okay, what can she see, what is tunnel vision like, how does that impact everything else? Like that is a whole learning curve, because like I've had experience of having migraines where I get tunnel vision, but again, that's not going to be the same thing, right? So it's I think it's really nuanced, and I think what's brilliant about this whole process and sort of filming it as well is it helps other people. It's all about breaking down barriers, isn't it? It helps other people understand like the nuances of what that experience is like.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Yeah, and also those for me as a sighted hearing person, it's been a journey because you're going and talking to other people about it. It's exactly that thing, isn't it, where you say to people, kind of, working with this woman who is deaf blind, and they instantly are like, deaf blind, like, it's kind of, it's so, like you say, it's so black and white, and you're like, and then they go, wow, she's climbing, how does she climb, and all of those things, or those little sort of moments, and you're like, oh, it's such a spectrum, and this is so what we are, have to challenge, kind of, isn't it, that spectrum of disability. It's something that I've always kind of thought about in terms of, even in kind of in education, kind of the thing. So it's really interesting. It's been interesting meeting when we talked to your mum and things like that about, and to you about those places where people are like, well, you could go to this school here because this is where people with disabilities go, and you're like, but I'm deaf, and they are kind of, they maybe have a spinal injury, or or just all of those different things, or they might be autistic, on the autistic spectrum, or kind of neurodiverse. All of those things are so. That's that box. That's that box. Yes. That's that box.
They try and lump you all in together. It's like, no.
Yeah. And I think it's really lovely to look at challenging those stereotypes, but also looking at those things like, well, how do those adaptations, how does technology and the world that we live in, how do we adapt those? And it's so what you were saying about that moment of when you look at those things and you think, but that's great for everybody. I've always thought that people with disability are amazing at adapting things, and you're like, well, why didn't we think of that? Why didn't I think of doing that in my world? Or there's something kind of really amazing about that adaptation that can just, it's like, well, throwing things on its head a little bit, isn't it? And saying, well, of course things should have much more reflective technology, or of course we could adapt that haptic technology that works for musicians to actually kind of work with, to actually work with for climbers. Yeah. Why wouldn't we? If we're communicating in that way. Yeah. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it really is. It really is. And I think it's also like, it's so much of it, like the narrative as well, like breaking down the barriers to the outdoor community, because it is very much like, oh, you like, and I had this the whole way through my recovery, oh, you can't do this because of X, Y, and Z, or you can do this, but you need to do it in that way. There was never like, oh, actually, yeah, let's look at a way of how we adapt it to make it possible. And it's kind of, this is the same thing. It's kind of like going, okay, you must get this, Caroline, like at the beginning, like, oh, no, you can't just go and climb a mountain. No. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, well, yeah, I can, but we need to adapt it and change it so as it's possible,
Yeah. And that thing of going, it needs people like you to kind of, to say, to just quietly get on and do it. And kind of, and that's what I love. It's just that, well, I'm just going to get on and do it then. I'm going to make that. I'm going to make you adapt that for me because I'm here. That's kind of, but not in a big, shouty, like, making it. It's just like, well, I'm here. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to get up there. So, yeah. And I think that's great, kind of. And so those things that we, that have been talked about with the adaptations of just also those things that are so low tech, as well, of we put this material on, or we line a hood so you can.
Yeah. I mean, one of the other really, I think, now that we're doing it, Caroline, I think this is so basic, and I'm kind of shocked now in hindsight that the rest of the industry just is not doing this. But one of the things we're looking at doing is kind of trying to create like a universal tactile system for the front, back, inside out, left and right of clothing. And you're kind of like, but why is nobody doing this like on all commercial product now? Like, why have we just gone, oh no, you can only use product if you've got full sight? Like, what? Yeah, it kind of blows my mind. Once you go down that level of design, you're kind of like, why aren't we doing this? This is bizarre. This is so elitist.
And also that I'm really dyslexic, and I find it really hard. I find my left and right like
Oh, mate, me too.
enormously bad. So to just be like, okay, I know that's the left side. So and just those things of how your brain sometimes works. Of
Yeah.
I don't how does that go on, or what does that? That's so. I wonder it'd be interesting for children as well, won't it, when they're learning?
Completely. I think it's interesting. I mean, I've started off with a very simplistic Braille-esque way of doing it, but I obviously want to work more with Caroline and more with other people. And I know that there's going to be other people next year who are visually impaired who are going to be adapting stuff for. So it's all going to feed into like the more knowledge that we have and the more feedback. But it may be a completely new type of tactile system that we come up with. You know, who knows yet? But yeah, it's kind of really exciting, and it's just kind of like, yeah, I even just think about like, even when you're in awful conditions and you have sometimes got no light and you've got to feel your way around things. It's kind of like, I feel like whatever we do for any kind of impairment, shall we say, I feel like all of those things become then they become like universal design, and we're like, why did we never think about that before? I mean, it's like the electric toothbrush, right? That was designed as an assistive technology for people with disability, and now everyone cannot live without their electric toothbrush. Yeah. And texting was developed for hard of hearing and hearing impairments. Wow. And now we don't live without texting. So it's just kind of like, when I was learning about all these things that are now becoming universal design, I find it so fascinating, really.
Yeah. What's been the one thing? So you've been trying the tech, you've been trying it all out. For you, what's been the one bit of kit that you've like, this has made such a difference in those things that you were trying kind of the other day, that you think kind of, this is really, I can see why this has made a difference?
One thing that I remember facing a lot is wearing my leggings inside out or my t-shirt inside out without realizing it the whole day in the city. Then at the end of the day, when I notice it, I'm like, oh God, how embarrassing. Yeah, I love that we are integrating simple, tactile symbols and clothing that hopefully will help, to like, when I put on, I always like look at myself like, oh, I have my t-shirt, it looks all okay, but I still sometimes put it on inside out, or the way around.
Yeah.
Vision. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Walking around backwards all day. And what about kind of, out of the stuff that you were testing the other day, what were the things that you were like, this is brilliant? What were those things?
I wasn't fully convinced with the reflective material at first, but when I tried it on with the lamp on my head, and then I was surprised how I could focus on the ground and the reflective was still shining in my tunnel vision. So I'm like, well, that has to need to be there.
Wow. So you could see the reflection of it so it was doubly lighting up the floor. And the footprint. So
well, it was Oh, sorry. It was lighting up. So, like, imagine that somebody's wearing gaiters, like the ankle area. So what it helped was then Caroline could see when he was placing his feet, like kind of like ankle level. Would you say? Yeah.
Wow.
Like, and when we did the winter skills course, we used the rope.
Yeah.
I think I would still use it, but with my tunnel vision, I still had to focus on the rope or the ground, but with the reflective, I could just focus on the ground, and it was still shining in my tunnel vision. Yeah. So it gave me that reference where my guide is in front of me.
Yeah. Will you have to think about snow depth? So like,
yeah, we will. But I mean, ultimately, I think if Caroline can see that that's disappeared, she's gonna know that the snow is deep and that foot has gone down. Yeah. I would hope. I mean, I don't know how else we're going to get around that one.
But also, that gives you an interesting measure as well, doesn't it, of how deep the snow is. And again, something that would benefit everybody.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's really interesting that you just brought that up, though, because that kind of made me think, because when I was measuring out how much of the gaiter should be taken up with fabric, maybe we should go higher on the fabric than we have now, to, you know, so as you have got a measure gauge of how far the snow, how deep the snow is.
Yeah.
That's a good thought, that is, Sarah.
Great. This is a good team. I think it's because I was thinking about ankle gaiters as opposed to like knee level gaiters, and having kind of been skiing in the past and just sunk. You're just like, okay, everyone's gone. Where have the children gone? Pull them out of the snow. That's kind of there. Wow. And what will you have to change? So we were talking, and we were saying about, like, because obviously you're going to Mirror Peak on Friday, but then you'll be going to Kilimanjaro, Kathmandu, Kenya, Mount Kenya. Very different landscape, very different kind of kit that I guess you'll need. What will you keep and what will stay the same? What will you need to are there things that you will all be thinking about changing for a snowy kind of walk to a hotter, maybe more kind of rocky kind of walk? Are there things you'll have to adapt for that?
I think it's similar, maybe slightly warmer, still cold at the summit.
Okay.
But for Mount Kenya, we are hoping to integrate haptics.
Mm-hmm.
The haptic, where me and my climbing partner will wirelessly, and we communicate through vibrations.
Yeah. And how are they going to go? Where are they going to go on the kit? What's the...
Wow, that's what we need to play around with, isn't it, Caroline? Like, at the moment it's got really long wires. So the idea that we're going with so far is that Caroline's going to have her backpack rucksack straps here, and then the bit that she can communicate with will be on the outer of the rucksack, so she can pull it to communicate. And then the wires hopefully will go, if she's wearing a jacket, go through the pocket opening, and the wires will go and then sit kind of near her collarbone so she can feel that vibration next to her skin. But we need to have a play around. We don't know how this is all going to work for her, especially if she's got things in her hands, like walking poles and whatnot. Like, how easy is it going to be? And so I think we're going to have a play, aren't we, really, to kind of figure it out.
And are there other because there's been sort of some other little adaptations from other companies that you've had with things like your glasses and things like that. Talk to me a little bit about how that works. Do you also then need to, so I was thinking about this, do you need to then adapt if you've put something inside your hood, so it's making your hood kind of a bit thicker because it's got the lining in it, do you then need to adapt things like helmets and like to be bigger or to kind of like to fit your glasses on underneath? How does it all work? Gosh, you're amazing. You've got so much to do.
Oh, well, firstly, that's all right, because the jacket that she's got, they're actually from the climbing range, from the mountaineering range. So it's got the room in it to put the helmet and glasses on.
Brilliant.
So that's okay. I mean,
Wow.
I think if really putting that fleece in for Caroline is really to stop the wind rustling the Gore-Tex. I think obviously then you've got the challenge of, but then your hearing aids are going to be a little bit more muted. But it'll be interesting, won't it, when you get the adapted jacket with the fleece in to kind of play around with that treble and bass when you're out there and see. I mean, it's crazy that like you can control everything on the app. Like that is so cool. I think it would be like having a bit of a play around, won't it? A bit of trial and error.
Yeah. And then your glasses, what have they done? What have your climbing glasses? What adaptation has that happened with those?
They put prescriptions on my sunglasses, and then they gave me over the glasses goggles system. And then they said that for next mountain, they'll see if anything is wet. They'll see if they can change something like that. But my optician here in Bath, she sounded very encouraging, saying, "Oh, you won't be able to find sports sunglasses with your prescription." So I was slightly panicking, so I emailed billions of sunglasses. And then one was like, "No, we can do it." So yeah, I'm gonna test it at the Mobic and see how well they work.
That's cool, isn't it? That's so cool. Because that's such a fundamental, isn't it, for you?
Yeah, the optician here in Bath is not sports based, so yeah, that's why they didn't have that full knowledge of what's available.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's those also that thing of that communication out to everybody of what's out there and what's kind of what is available for people and what can help, and you know that people like Berghaus are looking at adaptations of stuff. It's amazing, but do people know? We need to get that out there.
Yeah, I know what you mean. What? So like for other people in Caroline's position, be out there doing stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. I think that's where film is such like a powerful medium, isn't it, for being able to show all that.
Yeah, and it's it's that other thing, isn't it, that we've talked about but it's also that way of even with film. It's so interesting, this conversation about adaptation, because we're also looking and thinking about how do we adapt storytelling in a cinema situation or in a film situation. We're thinking in a black and white way of where you can either you could put subtitles on, but then what happens if you can't see the subtitles? Where you could put like all of those things that we're just thinking about cinema and storytelling in a really black and white way. And actually we have to start thinking it's about telling that story in an experience that people can understand. And we think technology will be able to help us with that, but we need to do all those kind of trials and thinking about that. It's all adapting things to enable everybody to be able to have that and share that experience and share your story kind of with it.
Yeah. But it's also as well, isn't it? It's like creating that level of empathy and connection for people who don't have any experience of it. Like, yeah, I mean, I think any way that you can kind of get across to like people who are fully sighted and full hearing what it's like, because I think it is that real black and white way of thinking about it. And actually, like sometimes I'm like, oh, I'd love to know for like 2 minutes what it's like for Caroline when she's not got her hearing aids in. Like what sounds can she hear, what can't she hear? Like, I mean, I have worn hearing aids in the past, so I do have some experience, but like I said, it's always, you want to know more about that actual person's real experience, actual lived experience. And like again, like, what is it like walking around with your type of tunnel vision, and how does like the change in light affect all of that and everything else, and yeah, once you've got your goggles on and then everything's steaming up and
yeah. And though, it is that, isn't it? Because you have that, you do want to have that empathy. I always kind of think about it when we go anywhere and we walk anywhere or we do sort of anything together, and I'm always thinking, you just kind of like, you rock up to the office and you've just kind of, you and Boz just rock up, and it was when we were in London and you start to think about those moments of, okay, this isn't just about kind of walking that familiar path, it's those kind of, all of those things that you are navigating every day, that means that your brain is working so much harder than mine has to walking around town. And so that kind of, all of those things around the impact on your tiredness. So all of those things, you've not just been getting yourself so physically fit, you've been doing all of that mental fitness as well, because your brain is working so much harder than my brain works on a daily basis.
yeah.
Those kind of things are interesting as well, I think, too.
It totally is. And I think again that does feed back into like the kind of models that we've formed around disability. So like I really go back to the social model, which is that people it's disabled people, because like people like Caroline and I are disabled by the way that society has designed things and created segregation for so long that they don't know how to interact with people who aren't the norm, right? So, and we haven't designed the world for everybody. And I really like that model of explaining it to people, because it's kind of like, no, there isn't anything wrong with me, there isn't anything wrong with Caroline, but it's the way that the world is designed and the way that we've set it up and the way that we interact or don't know how to interact that is kind of the problem. Like Caroline wouldn't be, Caroline wouldn't be as exhausted trying to get in all that extra information to do the same route as an able-bodied person if we designed it with the way that if Caroline was to design that whole walk and like what the kind of traffic signals were like and everything else, then it wouldn't be a problem. Do you know what I mean? Like it is where we find ourselves. I hate to say it, but designed by very privileged white men. And that's basically why our world is just not for other white privileged male men. It's genuinely that. And so for me, that's always kind of like the way that I try and get other people to think about it,
Yeah. Do you think, have you found, thinking about that, have you found when you've been in Nepal that it is less black and white, that it is more not necessarily set up for people with disability, but that there is more willingness to adapt? Or is it not like that? I don't know what I'm sort of Do you know what I mean by that?
Like culturally, is there a difference?
Culturally.
I volunteered in Nepal and Sri Lanka before, so I mostly was with the community, so they were very adaptable, very supportive, and I remember how me and other volunteers were comparing to how the education in Sri Lanka is and Nepal compared to UK, how very hands-on, very it really prepares you to the real world. Like they teach you how to be hairdresser or how to um, do cooking, like whereas in that school, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, uh, but yeah. So but I also uh, on Facebook groups. I I I joined this Facebook group for retinitis pigmentosa, so my eye condition, and it's an international uh, group. Yeah, see how it happens everywhere. Like there's misunderstanding, and I don't know if I'm the right person to compare it, like to make any comparison, but from what I noticed, I see how people overseas find it even harder to make them be understood by others. Like people in Nepal and Brazil, they're scared to use a cane because they think they're not blind enough, and others won't get it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I want to share my journey. So it's like international, like you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. I wondered if there was more of a, more of a culture kind of in somewhere like Nepal where things are less. I guess things are less rigid in terms of bureaucracy and I don't know, I might be completely wrong and it might be more rigid in terms of that. I'm just so wondering if it felt more adaptive. Like it feels like sometimes the Nepalese people that you've spoken to have been like, yeah, we can get you out of the mountain, of course we can. Whereas the kind of white men have been like, oh, what? No, that's going to be impossible. I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't lived in a pro, so I can't really say it. But yeah, so far the people that I have met are very accommodating. Um, I think it's still there's issues everywhere. Like I heard how the path is not even enough, so it's really hard with the cane or wheelchairs. So there's always problems everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thinking about Nepal, as we are always, what tech are you taking to Mirror Peak and trying out? What's your plan? Kind of,
What with Caroline's gear?
yeah.
Well, they I like keeping all my fingers crossed that they will like Caroline will receive her jacket that has the fleece in. She'll receive the gaiters that have the reflective and color on them, and then the gloves that will have the reflective and color on this side for her guide. And then obviously you're going to be trying, oh no, you're not going to be trying out the haptic for Mirror. It's not going to arrive in time, is it? It's going to be Kenya now. So I think it's that's from our side, that's what you've got. And then you've got other stuff, right? Like your watch and your Apple Watch. Are you going to be using that? Is that going to be?
Yeah, Apple Watch. Yeah, to test it, how it's reacting in high altitude and track my oxygen or yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll test about that will tell me where the north is.
Okay.
I don't know if it will arrive in time.
Who's that from? Apple?
No, no.
No.
Another university. But I don't know if we'll have enough time.
Why will that be important? Why is that?
It's a haptic way of me knowing where the north is instead of looking at the compass or.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool.
And I think it's normally used in the cities for blind people to have them walk straight in a straight line.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they like walk to the side or into the road.
Yeah.
They can't feel how straight they're walking.
Wow. That's cool. So that's another bit of adaptive technology.
Yeah.
Wow. That's good. That would be interesting. So it will keep you both in a straight line and going the right direction.
Again, something that would help everybody when they're outdoors. I mean, it's crazy, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it is like, it's, yeah, you design specifically, and then it's like, oh, actually, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's so cool.
It'll be, so is that going to sit right against sort of like your, under your base layers?
Yeah, on my skin.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we'll need to test how the battery reacts and
Yeah. Those things are going to be interesting as well, aren't they? Battery, and that's why it's quite good because it's going to be really. How cold's it going to be in Mirror Peak?
At the summit it might go -20, -30. I don't know.
And how high is Mirror Peak?
6,300 something.
Is that going to be your highest that you've done? Yeah. Is there anything that you're worried about?
Just very if I'll get any severe high altitude symptoms, like what if I haven't trained hard enough or yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just hoping everything will go fine. Like, my team will get along each other. Will be able to communicate well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting. Wow. Oh, cool. Thank you for like this update. And thank you for this conversation. It's such an interesting conversation to be having about about that adaptive kind of technology and about how kind of it can just help people get out there, do that thing, just kind of, and those kind of thoughts around kind of that actually this isn't about disability. It's we've made this kind of
it's about being human.
about being human.
Really, it's about being human. And I think for so long it's been like that attitude of like to do something, you almost have to be superhuman, or and that we've been brought up to like do everything perfectly. Like, just I think that real humanness, us being human, has really been missing for a long time. And actually, with being human comes complexity,
Yeah.
and we need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, that summed it up beautifully. Thank you. Right. It is. Like, be more human, people. Be more human.
Yeah.
Cool.
Instead of this, I've got to be heroic and I've got to go and be superhuman and climb through all this adversity and do this. It's kind of like, well, yeah, but you're human as well. So, like, and we're all on a spectrum somewhere. So yeah.